Hey, hello and welcome to the next, probably the penultimate update for the Rainbow Yarn Recycling Project. I've got more videos prior to this, so the yarn is finished. I think I last did a check-in when I'd been doing some singles and I showed some of that, and then I have plied it into a triple ply yarn, and I've done that through the chain ply method, which I think I showed in my first video. If you want more details on that, I learned how to do it from watching a Gillian Eve video. So Gillian Eve chain ply. So I think that's what the video is called. If you search that, you'll find it. So I ended up, because I said I wasn't really sure how much I was going to be able to put onto the bobbin or how much I was going to be able to spin. I had to do it in 2 balls as opposed to just doing it all in one. So when I was doing the singles, I divided all of the fibre into 4. So I suppose that's probably the same amount of yardage if it's kind of halved, but I guess it's thirds. Whatever. The spindle was kind of overfull, so I weighed out 10 grams of each colour. So the overall weight was 70 grams. So each spindle was absolutely bursting right at the brink. It's my drop spindle that I showed in the previous videos, and it was completely like that the whole way along. And it was kind of getting to the point where it was hard to find somewhere to hold it to keep working on the last colour that was in there. This much pink was left, and it was trying to move it around, and then all the yarn around there was threatening to fall off the other end and tangle into a big knot. It was a nightmare. But I got it all done, so I did it into 2 bobbins. So I think what I'm taking away from that for future me is I probably need to be aiming for 25 or 30 grams as my maximum amount to have on a bobbin at any point. And I think that's just a good thing to kind of keep in mind. And perhaps if you have similar projects and you're trying to work out how much you can spin in a single go, it's possibly a good amount to aim for. If you're drop spindling with a spindle that looks similar to mine. I guess you could have a longer spindle. You have one that's like a yardstick, spinning around a walking stick. Something. Spin as much fibre as you want. There are no rules. So I'd imagine you might want to see it. So I did it round the back of a chair in order to make a nice pretty skein. And then I did the other one below it, and I was coming home after being out all evening, and it was midnight, and I was tired from having talking, and I did not think that I would need to then slide it over slide it up to get the skein off. I did not think this through. So one of them is a skein, and one of them I wound in a ball just off. So this is the guy that I wound in a ball, and this is my pretty hand-spun, hand-dye style when you buy your independent yarn skein. These are my 2 projects. These are my 2 results. They are the same-ish, with whatever amount of variation that they're going to have naturally, but they're the same quantity. And I think it's quite interesting to see how they look next to each other, and how looking at each of them makes me feel, I think, is quite interesting. So just to reflect a little bit on that, how the yarn has looked at each stage of the process, and it's had a big impact on how I've felt about how I'm doing. It's something that came up in a Dan Olsen video where he was talking about Jamie Oliver and chicken nuggets, and saying it is not reasonable to expect that food looks good at every stage in the process, and I'm sure everybody's made food at some point, and possibly you have something and it's this looks really weird, but then when it's done it looks really good. Chicken, if you've had that from raw to cooked, it's visually very different. Same with some other kind of meats, I guess, or anything that you highly process that's that looks a little bit weird, and then you put it together in the end it looks nice, and it's a bit of a trust the process thing. So something to consider if you're doing your own project and you're feeling a little bit nervous about it because you're quite new, is to perhaps try and make either kind of keep that in mind of I'm sure it'll look nice when it's done, or to keep each bit of it looking neat and tidy is probably going to make you feel like you're doing a better job, even if it is exactly the same. It's weird. So even when I had it plied when I was doing the singles and all the colours lined up into the nice, neat rainbow. And I'd done them all in that same order, but sometimes it wasn't sitting neatly in stripes on the order like I showed in the last video. And that made it look worse. It made it look messier. It made it look like the colours weren't transitioning into each other as nicely as they were, even though they were exactly the same. But when I had them all kind of line up, it was like, oh, look at this beautiful thing that I'm creating. And the same was when I wound them onto the loo roll. So with the third one, I made a particular effort to do the pretty centre pull ball look. And that one looked the best. I'm sure that I wound it, because I can't tell now which one was the third bobbin. I don't even know which half it's in. But yeah, visually it looked so stunning. My partner was even pointing out, of just like, wow, that looks amazing. The rest of them going, oh, I can't believe you made that, it looks amazing. Compared to like when I just like wrapped it around messily, it didn't look like I'd done such a beautiful job. It was still like that, what are you doing? Why are you being so weird about this? Like, this is a strange project and I do not trust the process, which like other people didn't. So something as well, if you're trying to perhaps communicate to other people, as well as like your own opinions of being like, well, I know it's going to look great. Communicating that to other people of being like, look how elegant it looks halfway through and it's only going to get better from here. Trust the process, it'll look good. I believe in you. You can fit a lot of rubles in that dead rat and you can put a bow on it too. But I think this is quite artistically demonstrated with the difference here. So this is how I learnt to do balls of wool. Like, you do it around your fingers, around the middle, so you make like that little bobbin. I think I had some yarn that was wrapped like that. I do. I didn't make this is just commercial yarn. You wrap it like that and then you wrap around in all of the different directions and you end up making a ball. And this is a very functional ball of yarn. And you can see some of the colours kind of through there because there's not vast quantities of any of it, because the colour changes and repeats reasonably quickly. So you can see some of the colours are not all through there. But this looks prettier. Like, I would pay twice as much for this than this, even though they're exactly the same. Like, they're just wound differently. And I don't know if this is because this is a newer method. You can obviously see all of the colours, which I'd imagine is going to be really helpful for storage. So perhaps consider that as well if you're doing like colour changing yarns and you're doing quite a lot of different colour changing yarns. Consider storing them in a way that you can see all of the colours, whether that's a cake or a wound up skein like this. Maybe that's why people do it. What are we learning about what other people do and why they do it? And yeah, so maybe that's why. But consider how you're storing it, because with this one, like if I'd made, I know what this is because I've just made it and I haven't made vast quantities of yarn, but if I'd made something that maybe had just half the rainbow colours, so only the like pink, purple, blue to like green, and didn't have the kind of more fire shades. So if I'd made like more peacock yarn, I wouldn't necessarily know if it was peacock yarn or rainbow yarn from something, especially if the colour changes were a bit longer. You wouldn't necessarily know, whereas with this one, I can see all of the different colours and I can see all the different strands. So it's a much better indication of how it looks. Just for reference as well, this is just when you wind it up in a skein, you do like the little figure of eight thing to tie it and secure the four corners. So that's what this little yellowy bits are. That's not yarn I wound, that's just holding the skein together, because that's the way I know how to do it. I need to learn how to wind my hanks and skeins better, because I don't think I'm doing it right. But you know, I'm doing it sufficiently. I'm doing it fine. I don't need to. I might do in order to make it look more like other people's. But yeah, so what I've created is of variable consistency, and I don't know if that's possibly because of the fibre, because I'm using very imperfect fibre, because I'm recycling it. That's the whole point. So I've got a few little schlubby bumpy bits. I've got some bits that are a bit thicker. I've got some bits that are a little bit thinner. I've probably over and underspun various spots. One of the things in a Gillian Lee video that I watched the other day was that actually when you ply your yarn, it hides a lot of your mistakes, because if you've got like a little bit that's underspun, a little bit that's overspun, like it'll probably even out. So if you've got a thick bit and a thin bit. Overall, from a knitting perspective, because I am planning on knitting this, I would say I've probably spun an Aran weight yarn. Just to hold it up against like my fingers. I'd say it's between like a double knit and an Aran. I think that yellow part there is quite sort of representative. So you can see it like compared to my hands. I don't know how helpful that is because you don't have my hands as a reference. I don't helpfully have a ruler or anything. But that little bobbin that I had, this is like a double knit, quite a thick double knit. So that perhaps gives an idea of what it is. And there is variability. I just noticed that particularly in some of the pink showed it. So you can see that there's some kind of skinnier bits and some thicker bits, and it's not wonderfully consistent. But as a wonderful video I watched recently from Julie, it gives a character. It's that big discussion they were having. It's been very impactful. And yeah, watching people talking about like misconceptions, like there is no one true way, just do what works for you. Like whatever, that's been really nice actually with continuing and finishing this off. I'm gonna open up the spinny bit. So yeah, I'll show you how I did it, and if you know a better way or a different way or like a good tutorial, please show me. Please link it, message about it in the comments, whatever. So this is what it looks like in its, I don't know what this is called, skein. And when it's wound up, it's a hank. So this is what it looks like. This is how it looked when I took it off the back of the chair. Mostly this is just a video where I play with yarn in front of you because I'm excited because I made it. And I'm very happy with it as well. Like as far as a review, I'm thrilled. It's come out how, I don't really know how I envisaged it, but it's come out very cool. It looks like I could have bought it from someone that knows much more about what they're doing. I wouldn't have put this down as like one of baby's first projects. Yeah, so I've been doing round and round, which I think you do right, you go the other way, and then like you have some way of tucking it through, and I just only half tuck it through because if you tuck it through all the way it just comes back open. There's something different that I think you're supposed to do to make it look like how it does when you buy it from like the hand spun and indie dyers, but I mean it's tidy enough. I can just I can put it in the drawer or whatever until I'm waiting. Yeah, I'm planning on making a beanie with this, and then I will see how much I have left. It is 70 grams, I did weigh it, like the two balls together, and I did an amazing eyeball thing. I weighed just this guy, and it's 33 grams, so exactly half would have been, so overall the two things together came out as 71 grams. So obviously half would have been 35 and a half, and this is 33, so that's pretty close considering how much I eyeballed just for doing the repeats. So one would think that there's probably like a reasonable amount of consistency, maybe not to the centimetre, the millimetre, the micron, whatever, but yeah. And Julian video told me that actually isn't that important and it's fine, and yeah. So that was kind of like cool to notice that I'd done like a pretty good job of that. It wasn't vastly uneven. One of the other really cool things which I wanted to mention as I'm kind of talking about the end process of the yarn creation, not necessarily the end point of the project, was that I've had very different, and I think I may have mentioned this when I was talking about the carding things, I've had very different impressions of what the colours are. So when they were all kind of just bunched, it looked bright. So I would have expected, like this patch is a pretty good representation. So this bright yellow, the bright orange, the reds, very like bright yarn, quite like all solid colours, because most of the things were little snips from solid colour yarns. They weren't like variegated yarns themselves for the most part. It was like cheap single colour yarns that the person had been working with that gave them to me. And so I was kind of expecting things to look like that. And then as I carded it all out and got it really fluffy, it looked very light and it was all very pastel. And then as I started spinning it, that brightness kind of came back to it. So the very neatly wound third batch of the singles, the one that looked like amazing, it looked like this amazing stained glass. I think I showed it in the last video. And that was all very vibrant and very saturated colours. And I think like the general impression that I get of the colours, because obviously there's a lot of variation, there's a lot of variation within the colours and between the colours. The overall variation of like impression that I get is that this is like bright colours like felt tip pens or crayons scribbled over a bit of white paper. I don't know if that's the impression that you get. Kind of like this part represents it quite well. That it almost feels like white with colour on top of it. And some bits feel more like that than others. I think the pink feels very much like that, and the purple and the blue, and then perhaps like the yellow and orange, because there's less variation in the colours. They feel more like a solid colour. And some of the red feels like quite nice and dark, appealing to my more gothic heart. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So again, if you're doing your own spinning projects, and I guess if you look at some fibre, depending on how, I think I did the Rolags in the most fluffy way because I'd done them, like carded all the fibre and then folded them that way. So I think there was the most air and the lightest that it was. But I found like carded fibre versus like spun fibre, the carded fibre has always looked lighter. So something to consider if you have like, if you're buying fibre, that it might end up going less pastel, darker, or more vibrant or intense. As part of that, something to consider. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about yarn at this stage. One other thing that was really nice that someone had said to me, which I think is quite nice to share, is that sometimes this is the end product for you, like emotionally and whatever. So they said sometimes you want the spinning to be the craft. So it's not that you're spinning yarn in order to knit it into a project. Obviously you can do that, or crochet, or whatever you want to do. Sometimes you are just spinning yarn because you are somebody that likes to spin yarn. And so this is the final step. So even if I didn't have, because people sometimes asked if I've shared stuff in like Facebook groups and stuff, like, oh, do you know what you're going to make with it? And I do, and I've had an idea that I wanted to make a beanie because I do want to knit it up into a bit of a sample and swatch it in that way. I'm not going to make an actual swatch because I am an agent of chaos and I never make gauge swatches. My friend sent me a meme the other day about like, oh, when the pattern says to block your gauge swatch, and I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And I was like, haha, bold of you to assume I'm making a gauge swatch in the first place. But yeah, I do want to knit it up and see how it looks. So for me and for this project, I do want to. But I've definitely done, like, you can make things and then you can just put them aside, and essentially you can like make your stash items in a way. So making it to keep it in my stash and be excited by it and inspired by it and think about a project is legitimate, and keeping it in my stash forever, keeping it thinking that maybe I'll use it for something at some point and then gifting it on to someone else are all legit. And I just want to pass on that sentiment and that feeling, because I think I found quite a lot of things stopped me on my spinning journey, and I don't think it would have gone any particularly different because of like other life stuff, but there was a lot of stuff which definitely made the journey harder than it needed to be. And the nice sentiments that people have expressed to me as I've said, oh, I'm just finding spinning so difficult because of X, Y, or Z, I want to just pass those on so that you don't also end up finding spinning really difficult or worry about certain things that maybe I worried about. Maybe you have those thoughts in your head as well. We're all the same in very many ways, and that's the sappy thought to end the video on. So I will do one more update when I have made the item. I feel like everything went from idea and I've kind of started carding, and maybe at some point it'll be done, to like finished yarn very quickly. I think this next bit's going to take a little while, or maybe I'll have a video up tomorrow. I don't know how my day's going to go. But yeah, fit a lot of rubles in your dead rat. Don't throw away your yarn snips, just card them and turn them into wonderful, unique, original, hand-spun drop spindle yarn. Turns out it's not that hard. The world has been lying to you, and I have a massive bag. I probably have my life expectancy of yarn if I just card and spin all of the freaking bits of acrylic I've got. Oh, there's one more thing which I don't know if is a very unique to me thing or something else, but maybe to consider. The colour that I was doing, because like some colours I really like and some colours I really freaking hate. Red, fantastic. The blues, love them. Purple, yes. Yellow, in the freaking bin. It's one of my best friend's colours, so like all of the yellow stuff just slowly goes like off to her. Like, enjoy it. I made it in yellow. You just have it. Get it out of my house. It felt like I was doing so much yellow. Oh no, I accidentally pulled out. Like, I've done a quarter of the red and like a quarter of the blue and a quarter of the green and 9/4 of yellow. Oh no, it's all in this first batch. And it wasn't. I'd done exactly like the 2.5 grams or so of yellow in that, but it just felt longer because I dislike the colour. So I don't know if that's just me or and because I'm really bad at estimating, although I seem to have got some of my estimating very correct on this project. But like, be aware if you're doing dividing up based on seems about right that one's emotions might might impact on that. Yeah, so stay safe, stay happy, make your own yarn, have fun, and remember you can fit an awful lot of rubles in a dead rat. And I'll see you next time.